She arrives in a new country, but the man who promised to meet her never shows up. Instead, a stranger picks her up and tells her nothing. That same day, she hears the truth. The most dangerous man in the city is watching her. Days later, she sits across from him at dinner, expecting a threat. But what he says instead changes everything. I'm dying. Now the man she came to love is caught between a father who destroyed lives, a brother trapped inside a criminal empire, and a truth that could tear everything apart. So here's what you need to ask yourself. Did she walk into this story by choice? Or was she the one thing that could finally break it? Before we start, subscribe, because by the end of this story, you'll wish you found this channel sooner. She arrived in spring, as promised. But the city that met her at the gate was not the one Sung-min had described in quiet evening phone calls. Not the pale paper sky or the directed energy or the bookshop on the street with no name on the signs, because everyone who needed it already knew where it was. The city that met her was raining, cold in a way that felt deliberate. And Sung-min was not at the airport. Harry was. That was the first thing. Harry, who met her at arrivals with an umbrella she hadn't opened, and an expression that had been carefully assembled to look like nothing at all, which Maggie had, over 7 months of phone calls and occasional visits, learned to read as its opposite. He was called away this morning, Harry said. He sends his apologies. Called away where? A pause that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. He'll explain tonight. Harry took Maggie's bag without asking. Come, the traffic is bad. Maggie came. She did not push, not yet. But she watched Harry's hands on the steering wheel the whole ride into the city, and Harry's hands were too still, the way hands are when someone is concentrating on keeping them from doing something else, entirely. The hotel was beautiful, small, old, tucked into a neighborhood that smelled of roasted barley and spring rain and something floral she couldn't name. And then she could, because she had smelled it before. Above a tea shop, in a doctor's office. On the worst night that had become the beginning of everything. She stood in the hotel room and looked at the city through glass and thought, something is wrong. Her phone showed nothing from Sung-min. Not exactly silence. He had texted at 6 a.m. her time while she was still in the air. I'll be there. Blue Door Tea Shop after you check in. They're expecting you. And then, 2 hours later, a second message she had read on the ground and not yet fully processed. Change of plans. I'm sorry. Tonight instead. Stay close to Harry. Stay close to Harry. In 7 months, he had never once told her to stay close to anyone. The tea shop had a blue door, as promised, and an owner named Mrs. O who was 73 years old, 4'11", and looked at Maggie with the particular expression of someone who has heard a great deal about a person and is now conducting a quiet audit to see whether the reports were accurate. She brought tea without being asked. She sat across from Maggie at a table near the window in a way that suggested this was her table, and everything else in the room, the chairs, the other customers, the rain against the glass, was a guest. You speak Korean, she said. Not a question. I do, Maggie said. He told me you were good. A pause. Mrs. O poured with the unhurried precision of someone who had done this 10,000 times and still considered each cup. He understates things. You are better than good. She set down the pot and looked at Maggie over the rim of her cup. You have an accent from his region. Did you know that? Maggie stilled. I didn't. The way you said yes just now, the vowel, it's from the South. From a particular part of the South that is not taught in textbooks and not common even among native speakers from elsewhere. Mrs. O set down her cup with a small, decisive click. He has been speaking Korean with you for 7 months. Yes, every evening. Most evenings. Mrs. O looked at her for a long moment with the kind of patience that belongs to people who have watched many things unfold over many years and have learned that the important ones cannot be rushed. He doesn't speak Korean casually, she said quietly. Outside the team. Outside the people he trusts completely. She traced the rim of her cup. His father controlled every room he was ever in by controlling language. Made every serious meeting happen in Mandarin because his father is more fluent and Sung-min would always be half a step behind. Kept it about advantage, about keeping the other person slightly off balance, slightly reaching. She paused. Sung-min stopped speaking Korean in unguarded moments when he was very young, and then a pause. He started speaking it with you. The rain moved against the blue door. Maggie thought about 7 months of evenings, about idioms and regional grammar, and the word inyon said in a dark car while a traffic light changed outside. About a paper she had written on the untranslatability of emotion, which he had read in a single night and hadn't mentioned until she was standing in another country entirely. "What's happening?" she said. "With his father?" Mrs. O looked at her steadily. "His father," she said, "has come home. His name was Ro Jae-won." Maggie found this out not from Sung-min, who arrived at the hotel at 7 in the evening looking like a man who had spent the day holding a door shut with his body and was only now allowing himself to stop, but from Hyrie, who had clearly decided that Maggie deserved to know exactly what she was walking into and had made that decision on her own, without being asked, which Maggie took as a measure of how serious things were. "He's been in China for 3 years, Harry said. They were in Maggie's hotel room, sitting on opposite ends of the small sofa near the window, the city lit and rainy below them. Harry had brought food, dumplings, wrapped in paper, already cooling, and set them on the table without comment. He ran the network from there after Sung-min refused to take it over. He passed the worst of it to Sung-min's older brother, Jae-hyun, and kept the pieces he considered most valuable. A pause. 3 weeks ago, Jae-won came back to Seoul. He says it's retirement. He says he wants to reconnect with his sons before it's too late. "Before it's too late," Maggie repeated. "What does that mean?" Harry looked at her hands for a moment. "We don't know yet. It might mean age. It might mean something else." She looked up. "What we do know is that the last time Jae-won used the word reconnect, a man who had left his organization lost his business, his apartment, and 2 years of his life to a legal case manufactured entirely from nothing." Her voice stayed level. "Jae-won doesn't retire. Jae-won reasserts. He finds a new angle, and he comes at you from it." "What angle does he have now?" Harry was quiet for a moment. "You," she said. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. "He's been watching Sung-min for a long time," Harry continued carefully. "Since the trafficking ring operation last year, the watch became more focused. Someone who matters to Sung-min is a tool. It's just how his father thinks." She paused. "He doesn't know who you are yet. He knows someone exists. He knows Sung-min has been different this past year. He knows there is a person." She met Maggie's eyes. "He doesn't know it's you specifically. But he is here, and you are here, and those two things being true at the same time is not a coincidence we can afford to treat lightly." Maggie looked at the rain on the window. She thought about a photograph left on an apartment door, about what it meant when someone wanted to show you they could reach you, about the particular grammar of men who communicated in displays of power so fluently they no longer noticed they were doing it. "Does Sung-min know you're telling me this?" she asked. "No," Harry said. "But he would not stop me if he did." A pause. "He would probably be relieved. He is not good at delivering information that puts him at the center of a problem he didn't choose." "He's very good at apologies," Maggie said quietly. "Yes." Something moved across Harry's face that was warm and complicated and old. He learned that one the hard way. It took him a long time. She stood and picked up her jacket. "He'll be here soon. He knows you know about his father. Mrs. O would have said something, so you don't have to pretend." She paused at the door. "He will be relieved about that too, even if he doesn't say so immediately." She left. Maggie sat in the quiet hotel room and ate a dumpling that had gone cold and watched the city below her do its patient, indifferent work, and waited. Sung-min arrived at 7 with the rain still on his jacket and a tiredness that was not just the days. He stood in the doorway and looked at her, and she looked back, and she could see it very clearly. The weight he had been carrying since 8 a.m. when he sent the second message. The weight that had been building for 3 weeks before that. The weight that had a name and a face and a history, 64 years long. She stepped aside to let him in without making him explain himself in the doorway. He sat in the chair by the window. She sat on the sofa. The city ran with light and rain below them, and neither of them filled the silence immediately, which was one of the things she had learned about him. That silence was not absence, it was preparation. He was not avoiding speaking. He was making sure that when he did, it would be the true thing and not just the available thing. Hyeri told, "You," he said. "Yes. I was going to tell you myself. I know. She didn't want me to be unprepared when I saw your face." Maggie looked at him steadily. "She was right to tell me." He nodded once, looking at the window. "I'm sorry, your arrival was—" "Don't apologize for the arrival," she said. "Tell me about your father." He was quiet for a moment. Then he began to speak, and it was in Korean, not the considered, precise Korean of their phone calls, but something closer to the bone, older, harder to shape into sentences that held their structure. She stayed with every word of it. She did not rush him or simplify. "He called me this morning," Sungmin said. "Before your flight landed, he said he wanted to meet. He said—" A pause, the kind that costs something to cross. "He said he wanted to meet the woman who had clearly been such a good influence on me." A very long pause. Those were his exact words. The implications arranged themselves in the room like furniture being moved. "He's been watching long enough to know I'm here," Maggie said. "He's been watching long enough to know about you in general," Sungmin said. "For some time. He doesn't know your name yet. He knows a shape, a presence. He knows I have been different this year, and he has attributed that difference to a person." He paused. "Coming here now, when you were arriving, that was not a coincidence. That was a message. I know more than you think I do. I know when to appear." "That is a very fluent way," Maggie said carefully, "of saying very little while making the other person feel surrounded." Sungmin looked at her. "Yes," he said. "That is exactly what it is." "What did you say when he called?" "I told him I would consider it." "And what are you considering?" He turned from the window to face her directly, and she could see the calculation happening. Not cold calculation, the human kind, where two things you value are pulling in opposite directions, and you are trying to find a position that doesn't betray either. "Whether meeting him is more dangerous than refusing him," he said. "Whether bringing you near him, even in a controlled setting on ground I choose, is something I can justify." He paused. "Whether I have the right to make that calculation without asking you first." She held his gaze. "You're learning," she said. Something moved across his face that was not quite a smile, but was close enough to change the temperature of the room slightly. "I am trying," he said, and meant it the way people mean things when there is no audience. "Tell me about him," Maggie said. "Not the summary, not the operational concern, everything." She settled back against the sofa cushions. "I want to know who you came from." He talked for 2 hours. It was not the kind of talking she had heard from him before. The measured sentences, the precise relay of information shaped to be useful. This was older than that, harder to manage. He talked about a house in the south of the city where silences were not peaceful but strategic, where every room operated according to rules that were never stated because stating them would have diminished their power. About a father who rewarded performance and withheld warmth as a matter of principle, not cruelty as Sungmin had spent years trying to believe, because cruelty requires intention, and intention requires a kind of engagement that Jae-won had never quite extended to his sons. About a mother who was quiet and careful, and who had made the house livable by filling its edges with small warmth. Food made precisely as her sons preferred it. A light left on in the hallway. A hand rested briefly on a shoulder in passing. Things too small to be called love in any grand sense, and which had therefore constituted entirely the love available. She died when Sung-min was 17. Cancer, swift and undramatic, and completely indifferent to the fact that she was the only person in that house who had ever looked at her younger son and seen him clearly. "My father did not grieve," Sung-min said. "Or if he did, he grieved in the room he kept for things he didn't show anyone." And he closed the door and came out the next morning and continued. A pause. "I understand that now, more than I did then. I have rooms like that too." He looked at the floor. "Then I understood it as confirmation of something I had been trying not to believe. That he didn't feel things," Maggie said. "That feelings were, to him, inefficiency." A pause. "He is not a monster. I want to be clear about that. He is a man who was taught, very early, that the world responds to power and strategy, and that everything else, affection, softness, the small dailiness of love, is a vulnerability to be managed rather than a life to be lived." He paused again. "He taught us the same thing. My brother learned it. I refused the lesson, and the refusal cost me everything that had been conditional on my compliance." "Which was everything," Maggie said quietly. "Which was everything," he agreed. He told her about the moment, at 21, in his father's study, on a Tuesday afternoon that had been ordinary until it suddenly wasn't. When he had looked at what the Row network was, what it moved and who it harmed and what it was building toward, and said no. In Korean. Clearly. In the language his father used to diminish and his mother had used to comfort, which meant the word landed as both a refusal and a declaration. His father had not shouted. He had looked at Sung-min for a very long time with the expression of a man reassessing a piece on a board he had thought he understood. Then he had said, in Mandarin, always Mandarin when it mattered, "You will build something and I will wait. And when it is worth having, we will have this conversation again." 8 years had passed, and now he's decided, Maggie said, "that what you've built is worth having." "Now he's decided," Sung-min said, "that I have built something he cannot acquire any other way, and that the conversation is worth having again." A pause. "He also knows, this is the part I have been sitting with all day, that I am not 21 anymore. I am not someone he can simply wait out. So he has come back with a different approach. The approach being you," Maggie said. "The approach being you," he said. "Yes." She looked at him across the lamplit room. The rain had thinned to something quieter against the glass. Somewhere below them, the city was running its evening machinery. The restaurants filling, the streets still busy. The ordinary, enormous work of a city that did not know or care about the weight of what was happening in a hotel room on its 16th floor. "I want to meet him," she said. The room changed in the way rooms change when something unexpected is introduced. A shift in pressure, a redistribution of weight. "No," Sung-min said. The wall was back in his voice. Not anger. The wall was never anger with him. It was protection, reflexive and old. "Not for your sake," she said calmly. "Or not only. I want to look at him." She paused, choosing her words with the precision she brought to translation, because this was translation too, in a way, taking something that existed in her chest and finding the exact shape it needed to be in language. "I have spent 6 years studying a language and 7 months learning the person that language belongs to. And now the original source of everything that shaped and hurt and made that person is in this city and asking to be seen." She held his gaze. "I am a translator. I read what is underneath what is being said. He does not know that about me yet." A pause. "I want to be in the room." Sung-min looked at her for a long time. "He will try to read you," he said. "He reads everyone. He is very good at it. He will look for the edge, the thing you most want him not to find. And he will let you know he's found it. Not loudly, subtly, just enough to make you feel seen in the wrong way. Then I'll need to not have an edge he can find," she said. "Everyone has an edge. Mine is you," she said simply. "And he already knows that. So it isn't an edge anymore. It's just a fact we both have access to, She paused. Which means I go into that room with nothing to protect, which is, actually, the strongest position. The silence stretched. He was looking at her with the expression she had learned, the one that appeared when she had said something that moved the furniture of his thinking around without asking permission, and he was adjusting to the new arrangement. "You've been thinking about this," he said, "since Harry told me." "Yes. And you're not afraid of him." She considered this honestly. "I am aware of what he is. That's not the same thing as afraid." A pause. "I have sat across a table from a man who drugged me and looked him in the face while my vision was going. I think I can manage a dinner." Something in Sung-min's face shifted, deeply, the way tectonic things shift, not visible on the surface but felt. "You've been thinking about what to do for him too," she said quietly. "Not just about protecting me from him, about what to do about the fact that he came back." She paused. "What did you decide before you started worrying about me?" A long pause. "That refusing him escalates," he said. "That meeting him, controlled, on chosen ground, with the terms set in advance, is the better position. That giving him nothing to work with is more dangerous than giving him a room he cannot control." A pause. "And that whatever he came back to say, I need to hear it, because I have spent 8 years not hearing it and—" He stopped. "And?" she said gently. He looked at the window. "And I am 30 now, not 21. And the things I was certain about at 21 have developed more complexity since then." He was quiet for a moment. "My father is 64. He is not young. And I have been telling myself for 8 years that the door between us was his to open, because he was the one who built the wall. But," another pause, more difficult, "I am not sure anymore that being right about whose fault the wall is the same thing as being right about whether to wait forever for someone else to open it." The room was very quiet. Maggie did not say anything for a moment. She let the words settle where they needed to settle. "Tell me everything I need to know about him before we walk in," she said finally. "His tells, the things he considers weaknesses in other people, the language he uses when he's winning and the language he uses when he isn't." She paused. "Translate him for me, the way you translate things for yourself." Sung-min looked at her. Then, slowly, he began. They met him 4 days later. 4 days in which Sung-min showed her the city he had described on the phone. Not all of it, but pieces. The park near his apartment, which in April was overrun with cherry blossoms doing the extravagant, brief, slightly excessive thing that cherry blossoms do, as if they have been waiting all year for exactly this moment and intend to make absolutely certain no one misses it. The restaurant where the owner had known his mother, a small woman in her 60s who looked at Sung-min when he walked in with the particular expression of someone watching a child return to a room they left long ago. Something between welcome and grief, too complex to be just one thing. The bookshop on the street with no name on the signs, which turned out to be run by a man who spoke to Maggie in Korean for 3 full minutes before looking at her with visible confusion and saying, "Why do you sound like you're from here?" 4 days in which the city became real, the way cities only become real when someone who belongs to them shows you the inside. 4 days in which Sung-min was different. Not the phone call version of himself, not the operational version. Something that existed between those two things and was, she thought, closer to the original. He was more likely to be quiet without filling the quiet. More likely to stand in a place and simply be in it, without the sense of someone calculating next moves. He ate lunch sitting down. He slept, she suspected, for more than 4 hours. And then the 5th day came, and they got dressed for dinner in the way people get dressed when clothing is armor as much as clothing. And Do-won drove them to a restaurant in a part of the city that communicated its expensiveness through absence. No prices visible, no excess of decoration, nothing announcing itself, because the people for whom this place existed had already been told. Ro Jae-won had chosen it. Of course he had. He was not what she expected. She had built him, from Sung-min's 2 hours of careful and costly words, into something architectural, cold and precise and impenetrable, a man shaped entirely by the exercise of power over many years. What she found instead when he stood to greet them in the private room was a man of 64 with Sungmin's eyes. Exactly Sungmin's eyes, the same shape and depth, the same quality of looking that took the full measure of what it was looking at, and a warmth that she clocked immediately as practiced, not false, practiced. The difference being that false warmth is a lie, and practiced warmth is a skill, and skills can be genuine even when they are also deliberate. He was charming the way certain buildings are beautiful, because it was designed that way. Because design is not the same as accident, but it is also not the same as emptiness. He spoke first in Mandarin, smooth and immediate, the way a person deploys a reflex. Sungmin, without hesitation, answered in Korean. Jae-won's eyes moved to Maggie in the half-second that followed. A flicker of recalibration there and gone so fast she would have missed it if she hadn't been watching specifically for it. "You must be the translator," he said, switching to Korean without missing a beat. His Korean was excellent, slightly formal in the register of someone who spoke it correctly rather than natively, a hair's breadth of distance in it. "I am," Maggie said, in Korean. She let a breath pass before she said the next thing, to make sure it landed where she aimed it. "And you must be the man who makes every conversation happen on his own terms." A pause. Then Ro Jae-won smiled, and this one was different from the practiced warmth. This one arrived without being sent for, which meant it was real. "He said you were precise," Jae-won said. "He understates things," Maggie said. It was what Mrs. O had said about him, and she said it deliberately, watching his face for the flicker of recognition. "I know the people in your son's world. I have been here longer than you realize. You are not the only one who has been watching." Jae-won looked at her for one moment, longer than comfortable. Then he gestured toward the table with the ease of a man who had been directing people toward tables his entire life. "Please." They sat. The dinner was the most careful thing Maggie had ever participated in. Every sentence contained a second sentence inside it. Every question was a test dressed as conversation, and every answer was a position dressed as a response. Jae-won was skilled at this, impressively skilled in the way that people who have spent decades in rooms where the stakes were always higher than they appeared become skilled. But Maggie had spent her life learning to hear what lived underneath language, and she could follow the structure of it even as she participated in the surface of it. He asked her about her work with the genuine focused interest of a man who uses interest as a tool for gathering. She answered simply, watching his hands on the table, watching the way he listened with a particular attention of someone who is filing rather than simply hearing. He asked her which languages she found most difficult. She told him honestly, Yoruba syntax, because it reorganized time in ways that European languages didn't have the architecture for. He asked her which she found most beautiful. Korean, she said, without hesitation, without performance. Why? He asked. She looked at him across the table. Sungmin, at her left, had gone very still in the way he went still when he was giving nothing away. She thought about what she actually meant. Not the diplomatic answer, not the answer designed to navigate the table. The true answer. Because it has words for things that other languages have no room for, she said. Concepts that exist only in Korean. And some people treat that as a limitation, a gap, something to be filled or translated around. She paused. I think it's an invitation. It asks you to come close enough to understand, to earn the meaning. Another pause. Not many languages ask you to earn things. Korean asks for the work. And when you do the work, you find that what you've arrived at is precise. More precise than anything you had before. The table was quiet for a moment. Jae-won looked at her. Then, briefly, at Sung-min. Then back. Something moved across his face that was not the practiced warmth and was not the calculation. Something older than either. You chose well, he said to Sung-min in Mandarin. Low, not quite under his breath. The way a person says a private thing they have decided, on balance, to allow. Sung-min, in Korean, said, "I know." The fracture came over the third course. Jae-won had been building towards something all evening. She could feel it in the architecture of the conversation, the way each exchange had been laying a careful foundation for the next, the way nothing he said was accidental or merely social. He was constructing something. She had known it since the first course. She had been watching the shape of it emerge. What she had not predicted was where it came from. Not power, not leverage, not the display of information designed to make Sung-min feel surrounded. Instead, over a dessert that neither of them touched, Jae-won set down his spoon, placed his hands flat on the tablecloth, and Maggie felt the shock of it move through her entire body, because the gesture was exactly the gesture she had seen his son make across a different table on the worst night of her life. And he said, "I am sick." The private room was very quiet. "I have been sick for 8 months, Jae-won said. His voice was measured, careful, the voice of a man who has spent 64 years maintaining control of rooms and is maintaining control of this one too. Even now, even saying this, I did not come back to reassert anything. I came back because I am 64 years old and I have made many calculations in my life, and I have been correct about most of them, and the one I was wrong about." He paused, and something happened in his face, a pressure that had no clean exit. Was that there would always be more time, that the distance between me and my sons was a condition I had chosen, and that conditions chosen can be unchosen when one is ready. Another pause. "I am not ready, but I am running out of the luxury of readiness." Sung-min had not moved. He was sitting with the absolute stillness of a person who is absorbing something that has arrived from an unexpected direction and needs to be held still until the shape of it becomes clear. Maggie did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Jae-won, because Jae-won was still speaking and because looking away would have broken something in the room. "I know what I am," Jae-won said. "I know what I built, and I know what it cost, and I know that knowing these things does not undo them." A pause. "I am not here to be forgiven. I do not believe I have earned forgiveness, and I am not going to insult either of you by asking for it." He looked at Sung-min directly for the first time all evening. Not the measuring look, not the recalibrating look. Something stripped down to its actual face. "I am here because I want to know you again, before that becomes impossible." A pause. "That is all. There is no other agenda." The silence that followed was the longest of the evening. Sung-min picked up his glass, set it down without drinking. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and completely controlled, which Maggie had learned meant the opposite of what it appeared to mean. "How sick?" he said. Jae-won looked at his son. "Sick enough," he said, "that I came back." Maggie gave them the room. She excused herself with the composed ease of someone stepping away to make a call, and she walked into the corridor of the restaurant and stood against the wall in the expensive quiet. Art on the walls that cost enough to be there without being meaningful to anyone. Soft overhead lighting, the distant sound of other tables conducting their own ordinary evenings. And she breathed. Her phone showed a message from Harry, timed 40 minutes ago. "How is it going?" She typed back, "He's sick, it just came out. They're talking." A long pause. Then, "Oh." Then, after another pause, "Is Sung-min okay?" Maggie looked at the closed door at the end of the corridor. "I don't know yet," she typed. "I'll know when he comes out." She waited. She thought, standing in that corridor, about the things Sung-min had said 4 nights ago. That he had been telling himself for 8 years that the wall was his father's to open, because his father had built it, and that he was no longer certain that being right about blame was the same as being right about action. She thought about what it cost a person to say that, to hold both things, the legitimate grievance and the question of what to do with it, without letting one collapse into the other. She thought about her grandmother, who had spoken Yoruba with the density of someone for whom the language was not just communication, but cosmology. a way of organizing the world that English simply did not have the structure to replicate, who had died when Maggie was 12, leaving a particular silence in her life that had never entirely filled, only shifted and changed shape, who had once told her in Yoruba that the people who hurt us leave marks that look like them, so that we carry their faces forward in the world, whether we intend to or not. She thought about a boy who had grown up in a house where warmth was structural, strategic, and insufficient, and who had built, in its exact absence, something that was none of those things, who had made loyalty the currency of his world because he had grown up in a world where power was the currency, and he had looked at power and said, "Not this. I will find another way to make people stay." 20 minutes passed. The door opened. Sung-min came into the corridor and stood for a moment without speaking, the way he stood when he was letting something settle before he tried to shape it into words. His face was not devastated, not relieved. Something in between that did not map cleanly onto either. The expression of a person who has received information that has rearranged the room they have been living in for 8 years, and is standing in the doorway looking at the new arrangement, not yet sure whether it is better or worse, only certain that it is different. "He wants to meet again," Sung-min said. His voice was measured. "He told me—" He paused, and something moved in his throat. "He told me where Jae-hyun is. My brother. He has been trying to leave the network for 2 years. My father has been making that difficult." A pause. "He told me tonight where to find him. He said—" The voice controlled itself, held itself very carefully at a particular level. "He said that the one thing he wants, before he dies, is for both his sons to be free of what he built." Maggie looked at him. "Do you believe him?" she asked. A very long pause. "I don't know," he said, and it was honest in the same way. "I don't know if I'm okay" had been honest. In a dark car, months ago. The honesty of a person who has stopped performing certainty they don't have, and does not yet know what will fill the space where the performance used to be. "You don't have to know tonight," she said. "No. You have time now." A pause. He came back. "That means there is time." He looked at her. The corridor was quiet around them. Somewhere behind the closed door, Ro Jae-won was sitting alone with his hands flat on a tablecloth and whatever a man sits with when he has finally said the thing he came back to say. Sung-min reached out, slowly, the way he did everything that mattered, and set his hand flat against the wall beside her, not touching her, present. "I don't know how to do this," he said. A pause. "Any of it. The part with him, the part with Jae-hyun, the part where—" He stopped. "The part where you let the room have a window," Maggie said. He looked at her. She held his gaze. "You told me you put your past in a different room. You said you'd show it to me when I came." A pause. "I've been here 5 days, Sung-min. You've shown me almost everything." She paused again. "Not that room." He was very still. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to open it tonight," she said. "I'm asking you to know that I'm not going to run from what's inside it." She paused. "Whatever he is, whatever it cost you, whatever shape the grief has inside there." She looked at him steadily. "I speak 4 languages. I know how to sit with things that don't translate cleanly." He looked at her for a long time in the corridor of that expensive, silent restaurant, and something happened in his face that she had never seen there before. Not the almost smile, not the composed control, not the wall with its carefully managed windows, something that had no name in English. She thought she knew the word for it in Korean. She kept it, for now, inside her chest. "Come," she said. "Let's go." 3 days after the dinner, Sung-min called Jae-hyun. He did not tell Maggie he was going to do it. He told her afterward, from his apartment near the park, in the quiet of a late evening when the city outside was doing its patient, ordinary work. She was back in her hotel, feet tucked under her on the sofa, the window showing her a city she had been learning for 5 days, and felt, already, she could find her way inside. He answered, Sung-min said. What did he sound like? A pause. Like someone who has been waiting for a call for a long time and was trying not to show it. What did you say? Not much. The first time. We talked for, not long, 20 minutes. Another pause. He wants to meet. He said he has been trying to reach me for 2 years, through channels, through people we both know. I didn't receive those messages. I think I was making sure I didn't. Maggie was quiet for a moment. And now I think I was wrong about that. About choosing not to receive them. A very long pause. He is trying to leave. Our father has made that difficult in ways that are, it is complicated, what has been done. It will take time to undo. But he is trying. Another pause. He sounds like me. In small ways. The way he builds a sentence. The way he pauses before the thing he actually means. Maggie closed her eyes for a moment. I could have told you that, she said softly. How? Because you both chose to survive the same house differently, she said. Your brother stayed and tried to change things from inside. You left and tried to change things from outside. Both of those decisions take exactly the same kind of person. Someone who looked at what was wrong and decided they were going to do something about it, even if the something looked completely different. A pause. The shape of the decision is the same. That's why he sounds like you. The line was quiet for a long time. Outside Maggie's window, the city carried on. Somewhere below, someone was playing music from a window. Something she didn't recognize. Something in a minor key that suited the evening exactly. I'm flying home in 4 days, she said. I know. I don't want to. The pause that followed was the kind that contained several things at once. I know, he said again. And this time the 2 words had a different weight to them. I'll come back, she said. Not for a conference, not as a guest. She paused. I want to see what this looks like when I'm not a visitor. Another pause. I would like that, he said. And the way he said it, measured, careful, with the precision of a person who uses words exactly, told her that I would like that was the restrained version of something much larger. She smiled at the city below her. Tell Harry I said good night, she said. She's not here. She'll know anyway. A pause. Then, and she could hear the almost smile in it. Yes, she will. The letter arrived 3 weeks after Maggie flew home. Not to her. To Sung Min at his office, in an envelope with careful handwriting on the outside that he recognized immediately, even though he had never seen it before, because it looked exactly the way he had imagined it would look when he first heard about her, in a measured phone call, on the worst night that had become the beginning of everything. It was from Sue-ah. He read it standing at his desk, without sitting down, because he had picked it up intending to scan it, and found that he could not put it down. She was in school. She was at the top of her class in literature and 3rd in mathematics, and she was working on mathematics every evening with a stubbornness she described as embarrassing, but which her teacher had apparently called remarkable. She had a best friend named Duri and a cat named Bap who slept on her feet every night and who she suspected had the emotional intelligence of someone much older than a cat. She had a favorite teacher who taught literature and who had told her class once that the stories that stay with you are not the ones that tie everything neatly, but the ones that show you something true about what it means to be a person in the world, and that sometimes the truest thing a story can show you is that the people who found their way through the dark were not extraordinary. They were just people who refused to stop moving. At the end of the letter, in smaller handwriting, as if she had added it after she thought she was finished, I know you probably have a lot of people who need you. I just wanted you to know that I'm one of the ones who made it, and that I think about what that means sometimes, that someone decided I was worth finding. I think about that a lot. He read the letter 3 times. Then he took a photograph of it and sent it to Maggie with no message attached. She replied in 4 seconds, I'm keeping this. He replied, Me too. Then, after a pause, she's at the top of her literature class. Another pause. Then, of course she is. He looked at the photograph of the letter on his phone for a long moment. Then he pinned the letter itself to the wall above his desk, next to a map that no longer had any operational marks on it, and a photograph of a blue-doored tea shop that Harry had taken without telling him, and a sticky note in Binna's handwriting that said simply, "Eat something," which had been there for 8 months and which he had never removed. He sat down. He looked at the wall. He thought about a girl who had been moved across 3 countries and was now at the top of her literature class, and had a cat named Bap. He thought about a woman who spoke 4 languages, and had walked into the worst night of her life, and had not dissolved and had not run, and had sat across from him in a corridor and said, "You make the choice back," at him, with her own hand, across an entirely different kind of table. He thought about a brother whose voice sounded like his in the small ways, the structural ways, the ways that meant something. He thought about a father with Sung-min's eyes and practiced warmth and hands flat on a tablecloth and a sentence he had carried for 8 months before he was willing to say it. "I am not ready, but I am running out of the luxury of readiness." He thought about rooms, the ones you build to hold what you cannot yet carry, the ones you open when you find someone worth opening them for. He thought about a word in Korean that has no equivalent in English or French or Yoruba. That means a connection faded before the people involved had any say in it. That means some things were always going to find each other. He picked up his phone. He called his brother. Jae-hyun answered on the second ring. He sounded not surprised, careful, the way someone sounds when they have rehearsed for a call so many times that the rehearsal has become its own kind of distance, and now the real thing is happening and the rehearsal is no help. "I wasn't sure you'd call again," Jae-hyun said. "I wasn't sure either," Sung-min said. "But I did." A pause. "Are you—" Jae-hyun started. Stopped. Started again. "Are you angry at me?" "Still, I need to know that first." Sung-min thought about this honestly, the way Maggie had taught him. Not the diplomatic answer, not the one designed to navigate the moment, but the actual answer. "I was," he said. "For a long time. Not at what you chose. I understood the choosing, at the staying, at the years." A pause. "But I have been thinking about staying differently lately. About what it takes to stay inside something wrong and try to fix it from the inside." He paused again. "I think I was wrong to call that a failure of conviction. I think it might have been the harder choice." The line was quiet. "I didn't fix it," Jae-hyun said. His voice had something in it that was old and tired, and underneath both of those, still intact. "I tried. I don't know if any of it—" "You tried," Sung-min said. "That matters." A pause. "And you're trying to leave. That matters more." A very long silence. "He told you," Jae-hyun said. "About being sick." "Yes." "And?" Sung-min looked at the wall above his desk, at the letter and the photograph and the sticky note and the map with no marks on it. "And I don't know yet what to do with it," he said honestly. "But I know that not doing anything is not the right answer. Not anymore." A pause. "I have been learning recently that being right about where a wall came from is not the same thing as being right about whether to keep standing on your side of it." A pause. "She sounds remarkable," Jae-hyun said. "The translator." Sung-min was quiet for a moment. "Yes." "She was there at the dinner?" "Yes." "And she held her ground." "With him?" "She arrived at the table with no edges for him to find," Sung-min said. "He had nothing to work with. I have never seen him not have something to work with. Something that might have been a laugh, brief and rusty with disuse, came across the line. I would like to meet her." "You will," Sung-min said. And the certainty of it, as he said it, surprised him slightly. Not because he doubted it, but because certainty about the future had been, for most of his life, something he did not allow himself. Certainty was a vulnerability. Certainty gave things somewhere to go when they broke. He was, apparently, allowing it now. "Come to Seoul," he said, "whenever you're ready. I'll have Harry find you somewhere away from anything that connects to the old work, somewhere clean." A pause. We can figure out the rest from there." "Yes," Jae-hyun said, quietly. like someone accepting something that has been a long time coming. Yes, Sung-min said. They talked for another hour. Not about the network or their father or the logistics of what leaving required. About small things. About the city, which Jae-hyun had been living in a different part of for 2 years. About food. Jae-hyun had apparently become, over the course of his adult life, an unexpectedly serious cook, which made Sung-min go quiet for a moment because their mother had been the same way, for the same reason, in the same house. About a restaurant where the owner had known their mother, where the food still tasted like something they recognized. She'd take us there, Jae-hyun said. On the days when the house was, I know, Sung-min said. She'd order the same thing every time and pretend it was a different choice. I know. I went back, Jae-hyun said. Last year, by myself, the owner remembered. Sung-min looked at the wall. I went too, he said. 2 weeks ago, I took someone. A pause. Was it good? Jae-hyun asked. He meant the food. He also meant something else. Yes, Sung-min said. He also meant both things. It was very good. Maggie flew back to Seoul 6 weeks later. Not for a conference, not as a guest. She arrived on a Tuesday in early summer when the city had shed the cherry blossoms and settled into a green, humid, deliberately alive version of itself. The air was different from spring, warmer, thicker, carrying the particular smell of a city in full operation, everything growing slightly faster than expected. Sung-min was at the airport, standing at arrivals, in the dark jacket she recognized, watching the gate with the focused attention of a man who is waiting for something specific and has decided not to pretend otherwise. He had not brought flowers. He had not prepared a speech. He was simply there, in the way he was always simply there, entirely present, entirely himself, making no performance of either. She came through the doors. He saw her. Something happened in his face that had no operational name and needed none. He walked toward her. She walked toward him. They met in the middle of the arrivals hall, in the enormous, ordinary, unhurried middle of a space full of reunions that the world was not watching. And he reached out his hand, palm up, the way he had reached it out in a restaurant corridor on the worst night of her life, waiting for her to make the choice. The same gesture, the same patience. She looked at his hand. She looked at him. She thought about everything the gesture contained. The restaurant, and the corridor, and the photograph on the door, and the car in the dark, and the coffee on the front steps, and the map covered in 3 languages, and the word Inyeon, and a letter from a girl with a cat named Bap, and a brother whose voice sounded like his, and a father with his eyes and hands flat on a tablecloth, and all the evenings and all the documents and all the words, in 4 languages, that had been the long way of saying one thing and had now arrived at it. She put her hand in his. They walked out of the airport together into the early summer city, which received them the way cities receive everything, without ceremony, without comment, as one more small and significant fact among the millions of small and significant facts that constitute a place where people are always, in one way or another, arriving. Jae-hyun is coming next week, Sung-min said when they were in the car. I know. Hyeri told me. A pause. She tells you everything. She tells me the things you'd want me to know if you weren't worried about how they'd sound, Maggie said, which I think is her way of helping you. A pause. Yes, he said. I think so too. The city moved past the windows, green and humid and full of itself in the way of cities in early summer, loud in the places where it was loud and quiet, in the places where it kept its quiet things. And your father? She asked. We met again, Sung-min said. Last week. Without the armor. Without the calculation on either side. A pause. It was not easy. It was not warm exactly, but it was honest, in a way that things between us have not been honest before. Another pause. He is sick in the way that requires decisions, about treatment, about time. He asked me to to be involved in those decisions. I said I would think about it. And have you? Yes. And I said yes. He paused. Not because everything is resolved, not because the wall is gone, because... He paused, reaching for the precise shape of it. Because I am not the person who closes doors. I decided that a long time ago, about innocent people, about people who couldn't protect themselves. And I think... Another pause. I think that decision was always bigger than I made it. I think it was always about more than the work. Maggie looked at him. Yes, she said quietly. I think it was. They drove through the city in the particular silence that is not empty but full. The silence of two people who have said enough things that the quiet between them has its own history, its own warmth, its own fluency. I want to show you the bookshop again, Sung-min said after a while. I'd like that. And there is a market on Saturdays in the neighborhood near the old city. My mother used to go. I haven't... A pause. I haven't been back since she died. He paused again. I thought this time I would go. Maggie was quiet for a moment. I'll come with you, she said. He nodded once. The city moved past them. Somewhere to the left, the park was visible between buildings. Green and busy with the ordinary commerce of a summer afternoon. People eating and children running and someone playing music badly, and someone else playing it well, and everything happening at once. The way everything always happens at once in a place where life is being thoroughly, messily, insistently lived. Sung-min, she said. Yes, I know the word. A pause. The one I've been keeping inside for a while. She paused again. I think you know it too. He looked at her. The afternoon light came through the car window and made everything very ordinary and very clear. Yes, he said. I know it. Good, she said. And outside, the city continued. Unhurried, enormous, full of lives that were also stories, and stories that were also lives, and moments that were only moments until you looked back at them and saw they had always been something more. And two people moved through the middle of it, in a car heading toward a bookshop on a street with no signs, and understood, without needing to say it in any language, that some connections do not begin. They simply become visible. They were always there. 6 months later, Hyeri stood in a small restaurant in the south of the city where the owner had known someone's mother and the food still tasted like something recognizable. And she looked at a table where 4 people were eating and talking and once laughing, which was the part she had not entirely prepared herself for. The laughing. And she sent a single message to Do-hwan. Both brothers, his father, her, all at the same table. Do-hwan replied, How is he? She watched Sung-min across the room. He was listening to something Jae-hyun was saying, and his face had the expression it had when he was giving something his full, unguarded attention. Not performing attention, not calculating, simply present. And then Maggie said something from across the table, and he turned to look at her, and the expression changed into the one that Harry had been screenshotting for 6 months because she was human and she had earned the right. She typed back, He's here. He's really here. Do-hwan replied, Good. Ryle replied, Screenshot it. Binna, included by accident, replied, I'm crying in the kitchen again. I'm going to need a moment. Harry put her phone away and went back to her own table, ordered something warm, and sat in the restaurant where someone's mother used to go and listen to the sound of people finding their way back to each other. It was, she thought, an extremely good sound. Sua, in her protected home 300 kilometers away, was asleep. It was a Tuesday. She had an exam in the morning. Bap was on her feet. Dury had texted her at 11 to say goodnight and also that she had borrowed Sua's blue pen without asking and was sorry. She had replied, It's fine, keep it, good night. Then she had closed her eyes and thought, briefly, the way she sometimes did before sleep, about a man she had never met whose name she knew and whose decision had made all of this. The exam, the pen, the cat, the friend, the Tuesday, the morning coming possible. She thought, I am walking. Then she slept. Some stories end in resolution. This one ends in continuation, which is the only ending that is actually true. Because the people who find each other in the dark do not simply arrive in the light and stop. They carry it forward, into every room, in every language. Until life and love are no longer two things. They are simply the same thing, moving. Najaljiна요. I am doing well. If you believe some connections are meant to find us, subscribe. You're going to love what's coming next.